To all our viewers and listeners, welcome back to Open Heart Conversations. I'm your host, Reverend Dr. Jose Miguel Roman, and I am so extremely happy that today we're joined by the Chief Executive Officer and Spiritual Director of the United Palace of Spiritual Arts, Reverend Bishop Heather Shea. Welcome back.
Thank you, and welcome to all of you. I'm very excited about today's program.
So am I. And with us is also my regular co-host, Reverend Renee Rossi.
Thank you, Jose. Always a pleasure to be here with you.
And today we do have, exactly as Bishop Shea has said, a very, very special program. We will be exploring the Akashic Records with a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful guest, Mary Medeiros. Mary, welcome to Open Heart Conversations.
Thank you. Very exciting.
It is very exciting. And we're going to begin this with, I guess, the most basic question. What exactly are the Akashic Records? And what do we mean? What does the word Akasha mean?
Yeah, this is the question that so many people ask, as I did when I came to the records. I did not know what they were or what Akasha or the Akasha was as well. Well, Akasha is a Sanskrit word, and it means primary substance, that out of which all things are formed. So that's, to start with that. The Akashic Records are, they're like an experiential body of knowledge that contains everything that every soul has ever thought, said, or done over the course of its existence. From lifetime after lifetime after life. I mean, it just continues. The idea is that there's this one soul, and we begin as a one soul, and then we incarnate or reincarnate. And there is this sort of spiritual imprint that happens in this divine realm known as the Akashic realm. It's a divine essence. It's a divine space, a divine, it is not a real library. I think what happens is because we're talking esoterically, our third dimensional and logical brains want to kind of say, well, what is it? Where is it? Can I touch it? Well, no, it is a realm, and it has existed since the beginning of humanity. It has been called, it actually was only called Akashic Records, I think, later on, like more in the 1800s, possibly. I know Madame Blavatsky, who began the Theosophical Society, she talked about the Akashic Records. Edgar Cayce, apparently, I didn't know this, and I was following Edgar Cayce for years, and Edgar Cayce was accessing the Akashic realm. And I came to discover that later, which was really interesting to me. So we have this ethereal divine realm that exists. And the idea is, if we think of the Akash or Akasha, it's sort of this blank slate of essence of life force that started as this blank slate. And as humanity began to evolve, our actions, our thoughts, our experiences affect that realm. They become literally like an imprint, and each one of us has our own Akashic record with our own soul, our own soul's incarnations imprinted in this Akashic realm, this divine realm. It is about, it's light energies. It's the essence of life force itself in the form of light. So it's not spirits or entities, as far as I know. Okay, that's my experience with it. So that's the idea of the Akash, of the Akashic Records.
And where did that idea come from? Where did the idea for the Akashic Records actually come from?
Well, they've been around apparently since the beginning of time. And, I have to also say that the way that I came to the records was not by studying the records. It was a calling, probably and I'm sure, Renee, you can add to this, as psychics or mediums or others who have worked with the Akashic records, when we work in the records, it's a calling. It's a very interesting way that we meet up with the records. Are the records available to everybody? I may be answering other questions in here, but yes, they are. Anyone can access their Akashic records. We can talk a little more about that later on what is important for that to happen. Okay. So I didn't research the records to find out, who started it, when, what, where. However, every religion apparently has its own sort of version of what the Akash is, the book of life from the Bible. The idea of a realm that records, in a sense, our experiences and who we are as souls it's throughout history, and it's just been called different things. So where the idea began, my answer to that right now would be God. That's my own personal answer. Source.
I love that answer. So,
yeah.
You were mentioning the Bible, and when I have this vision, and other people have mentioned it to me, of the records, I'm thinking, like, is there this really big library someplace? What are the, and we think of records, we think of these tangible books or manuscripts or something. I'm kind of hearing source in the Bible, but what is it? Does it physically exist somewhere? Is it more in a realm or spirit? How would you describe? So
yeah.
Is it this vast book library somewhere or something?
No. I imagine, what's really beautiful about our time period today in our world is that we have science and spirituality that are finally shaking hands, thank God. And the records are not a physical place. We could call it, we've heard there's this center of the universe that is the crystalline grid, or the crystalline center of everything, of where all light and all of everything exists. I feel that there probably, we have language that can get in the way of interpreting these things, or we feel we have to interpret things. It just is this essence that exists. And I'd like to say here that the Akashic records exist inside ourselves. It's, it is like what Jesus talked about, which is that there is not this God force that's out there up in the clouds. It is inside us. So we're accessing the divine. When we open our records, we are accessing literally the divine aspect of ourselves. We're speaking to the light essences of our own soul's recorded history, we could say, including our experiences in the now time, from an etheric, this divine realm. So no, it's not a library. I think it's a great word though for it, because it's sort of where libraries are, where we can find out anything and everything, we hope, about everything. And so it is a library, but it's like a divine library, and it's a divine essence. So I hope that answered that question. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Bishop Shea, I think you also had a question regarding, masters or stuff like that.
Masters, teachers, and loved ones.
Who are the masters, teachers, and loved ones?
Yeah. So again, I'm sure, here's another thing that's important to know, that the Akashic records in the history of humanity were mostly accessed by, thousands and thousands of years ago by mystics and holy people. And as time advanced, we have been expanding as humanity. The planet is expanding. We know this. Consciousness is expanding. And as that's happening, we've heard a lot. We frequently hear, the veil's getting thinner. We've heard that a lot lately. And in a sense, I think it is. And Renee, I would love to hear what you think about this. So we're able to access much, much easier beyond our third dimensional reality. And so the records are beyond 3D. We know that. So the masters, so that being said, there have been different ways. I mean, Edgar Casey, the sleeping prophet, he did it in his way. He was tapping into the same realm. So for me, what I've studied, what resonated with me is I had studied with Linda Howe from, which I think, Renee, you're familiar with her, right? The Center for Akashic Studies out of Chicago. And what she has been downloaded, we can say, is a sacred prayer to open records. And also these light energies that oversee our records, known as the masters, teachers, and loved ones. And when I started to read about this, I lost time. Everything resonated for me. So I was like, this is really very real for me. So the masters are, and these are light energies, kind of like Abraham Hicks's pure positive consciousness. These are the light energies that oversee our records. They protect our records. They protect the records of the world, of the cosmos, probably. So the masters they've never been human, and they're light energies that literally protect our records, the integrity of our records, I should say. Teachers have also not ever been in third dimension or human, and they are light energies that come in and out of our lives, sometimes more than once in a lifetime, for different lessons or different journeys that we've chosen and experiences that we've chosen to have in a lifetime. So for example, if a soul has come and we find out through the records that a particular person, their soul incarnated into this lifetime to learn about self-love, okay, then there'll be a teacher energy with them. And they're also within their Akashic records. They're holding the integrity of that individual's soul records. And they will assist them ethereally, actually, in the learning of self-love, let's say, as an example. Loved ones of the third of the entourage, the light entourage, the loved ones are those who have been human and who we have experienced any form of love with in this particular lifetime. So it could be, a mother who's passed, or what, a loved one. It could be a teacher, anyone that we've expressed love with in any way, shape, or form, in a healthy way, obviously. And they're also holding the integrity of the records and what is being sought when we're in the records from that individual, the clarity that they're seeking. So the loved ones, it's interesting. I like to say that the loved ones are not there like a psychic reading, which is very valid and works, where you're more in a direct conversation with whoever's on the other side. They're more like their energy, their essence is not the essence of, they're not going to speak to us the way we knew them when they were alive with us. But it's more they're holding the goal, the integrity of the soul itself and the records. So sometimes I have experienced where there will be an energy and I will share it. I'll say, I'm feeling a grandmother energy right now. And it'll have an essence of kind of like, with the palace, but it'll have almost a personality, but it'll have an essence to it that the person will say, that's this person. And they're not there to chit chat. They're there to, to help impart what is needed for that individual, for what they're seeking while they're in their records. Best way to say it. So that's who the master teachers and loved ones are. And that's who through the sacred prayer, that's who I call on for a person or for myself when I'm doing my own records, my own masters, teachers, and loved ones, and they're invited. And when we open records, I can feel the energy shift. It's just pure positive love, like I've never experienced. That's how I know I'm in the records. And I remember Linda Howe saying once, and I love this, and she said, when you're working with clients and you finish a reading with them, if you don't fall in love with them, you have not been in their records. And I love that because, what does that mean, falling in love? Yeah, it's the falling in love that's way beyond human falling in love, right? I have experienced that and do 100% of the time through my work. And so I just love that. And I share that with everyone. That's how you know. That's how we know that we're working in divine, or we're working with the all that isness, is that we just feel love, and our brains can't figure it out, but we just feel it. So, yeah.
I was just going to comment briefly, and then Renee, I know your question, is that when I first fell in love with Mary and we worked together, Mary has produced and directed a program at the Palace and knows the Palace. And the Palace was one of those energies that came forth in my reading as an energy, and it's a very powerful energy. So it's interesting when you're working in this world, as you know, I was going for my own reading, but it was like, oh, the Palace is here. It's like, oh, hello. So, you know, so you've gotten to know the Palace in so many, in multiple dimensions, in multiple ways. So.
Well, and the reason that probably most likely happened was, first of all, the relationship, Heather, that you have with the Palace, and your past history with the essence of the Palace. You know, someone would say, well, you're saying a building was an individual in another life. Well, the essence of the Palace, I would answer yes. You know, that's why we can open, you know, I might be jumping through, you know, because I know some of what you guys are interested in talking about. So I might be answering some questions ahead of time. So actually, I'm going to wait for you to ask another one.
Great. So, Mary, you already mentioned the sacred prayer that you use to access the record. So I'm wondering if you can talk about that a bit more. Like, what is the significance of how one may get into the records? Like, what happens through that?
Well, I think with the sacred prayer is a couple of things are happening. We're summoning the masters, teachers, and loved ones, of course, with the permission of the person that we're reading, always. You can't just, that's very important. There's no running around opening people's records without them knowing about it or giving you the permission. It's a sacred practice. So the prayer, it's what it's doing is it's basically opening that portal for the flow of that light. And, you know, part of the prayer is to, there's the summoning of the master teachers and loved ones. And then there's also, as a practitioner, for me, I love the part where, you know, I'm asking that my own ego conscious is sort of set aside in a sense, so that I'm not really, my ego is not going to be in, it works, this prayer, when I do it, I don't have any interpretations during a reading. I'm just flowing it. And later on, when I close the records and there's a closing prayer, then I will have, you know, when my ego comes back in, I'll go, whoa, that was tough, or that poor person, or whatever. And I have compassion, but there's none of that. The prayer sets aside that aspect of ourselves. It summons the masters, teachers, and loved ones. And then by using the person's name, their legal name, is how we open the records, because the idea is that our legal name, or the name of a space, or the name of, let's just say spaces for now, it could be pets. The idea is that how we're known is etched in the records. That's how we open Renee's records versus Jose's records, because it's your name. So the name is named, and part of the prayer is said quietly and part is said out loud. And that's how the records, that's what the prayer does. It basically is opening up the portal for that specific person. Mm-hmm.
Great. And there are other ways to access the records as well, right? Not just this particular prayer, or is.
I'm sure. I mean, you know, I don't know. For me, this is what I'm using for me. Of course, my answer to that would be anyone can access their records. Now we can talk about what's needed before accessing the records.
Please, let's dive into that.
So here's the thing. The way that I came to the records was I didn't know anything about them, yet I did. But I didn't know I knew. So when so number one is understanding and having a relationship with the essence of divine, or God source, whatever we want to call it. It's been called so many things throughout history. That's you. If you don't have that, you're probably not going to access the records, right? And so it really helps to. The other part that is very important is that we have cleared, or have in a good perspective, our own trauma or wounds. And part of the work that I really valued to come to be a practitioner that I feel comfortable with being, was working on my own wounds through the Akashic records and healing my own wounds. It's really they get transmuted into light. That's the best way to say it. It's not, we don't look at our wounds and then stare at them and activate them and get rid of them. They have value. And so I think that, somebody who still has a lot of trauma in their lives that they haven't worked out, they're probably not going to be able to access it. How do we know? You just know. When you open the records, you just know. When I first opened the records, I was hearing blocks of thought that were not mine. And they were so amazing. And I began to write them, and they just were amazing. It wasn't something that I was thinking. I know the difference between I'm thinking it or it's coming in. Now, I might be a better candidate for this because of my creative work as a director and writer, because I have an imagination. And in the beginning of my opening my own records, I questioned myself a lot. And I used to say to friends of mine who I would share what came through, do you think this is just my own imagination? And it was hands down, no way, you don't even speak this way. So can anyone, of course, anyone can access the records. And I think it is in any way, somebody could just sit and meditate, of course. And if they have that connection with the divine inside themselves, not just, it's not outside ourselves, inside, that really strong connection and a kind of handle on our own past wounds and even wounds from past lives. When we come to that, so, maybe it's becoming a little bit more ascended, then the records, then you can do it, I believe, in any way that is pure, right? So that's what I think. It's not just the prayer. I'm finding now that I don't even have to use the prayer, and I'm hearing divine speak. And my own records, when I was studying the records and working in them, with Linda Howe and her groups, I noted that they actually said to me in one of my own readings, Mary, you will notice that you'll be hearing without even saying the sacred prayer. And that has been happening like the last year. It's really cool. Heather, you're so cute.
Mary, I have a question that you've kind of helped us explore a little bit during this conversation, but I want to delve a little bit deeper into it. And that is, how do you know that you're actually in the Akashic records? How is it that you actually feel when you're in them?
It's a very subtle shift in energy. Maybe it's easier for me to distinguish because I'll just say I'm very third dimensional. I love sense of humor. I'm kooky. I really am. I write comedy. I like South Park. Oh my gosh, how outrageous, right? Things like that, right? So I'm very rooted in some way in third dimension. And maybe that's why it is easier for me to know, because when I do open records, for me, it's the intention of participating in empowering people in their own divine selves. I cannot tell you how much meaning that has for me, because it worked when I discovered that about myself, and everything opened up in my life. Things became easier because I've experienced that. Then, I just want everyone to know how easy it is actually to live life from that perspective of knowing that we really are individual, beautiful, powerful, and co-creative divine beings. So when I opened records, the first time I did, I was hearing thoughts that weren't mine, and I felt a different energy. I felt love. Now, I do have to say, when I was very little, I grew up in a Catholic family. And as I grew older, obviously with the work I'm doing, I didn't resonate so much with organized religion. But when I was little, I remembered sitting in church, being really little, like first grade, second grade. And I remember feeling the dogma part. I didn't resist it. I wasn't a rebel. I just went, yeah, whatever. We come in with sins. I don't know. I didn't believe it when I was little. but I didn't worry about it. But I felt the presence of God. I felt the presence of God. I felt it. I felt something. And what's interesting too for me is I majored in music in college, and I wound up and I was studying Gregorian chant. Who studies Gregorian chant? Well, isn't that interesting? And I realized, and I found out that one of my past lives was as a nun, like many, many years ago, a cloistered nun. And I actually my life was shaped by the nuns that I had teaching me. They were wonderful. I have good nun stories. My connection, my knowing that there is a source, a mastermind, an essence of love that has choreographed this humanity. I had it at a young age. I just didn't know what it was called. So when I then was brought to when I was guided to the records, I'll say, I knew it. So when I first opened the records, there it was again. And I went, oh, not that I didn't have it, because I love people and I've been loving people in whatever I do. So that, I just didn't step back to say, wow, what is this? And then when I came to the records and first started opening the records, I could feel it. It's very subtle. I imagine that many psychics and mediums have that. It's so subtle. It's like this slipping into something and you're just there. And as long as you don't question it, it continues to download the divine messaging to you or to that person through me. I mean, I'm just the sieve and it goes through. So that's how it works for me. That's how I can tell.
Mary, are the Akashic records fixed or dynamic? And if they're dynamic, what makes them dynamic?
Well, again, this is sort of maybe different for many people, but from what I understand, it's a quantum field. And so quantum is always shifting. So what's fixed, the part that, from what my understanding is, the part of the records that are fixed are our sort of original souls, identity, maybe. Let's call it identity. So from the very first time that any of us as a soul chose to come to this planet the first time, there was some kind of a choice being made, not a choice in experiences and lifetimes, and that's different. But there's a deeper, my understanding is that there's this deeper choice in coming and choosing to be a part of this space and place called the cosmos, let's say, and that's fixed. And then then our soul chooses lifetimes that will align with that, okay? And so in then the choosing of those lifetimes, and within those lifetimes are the experiences, the choices we make, and it's always choice. And so the dynamic part is that part. We can choose any way we want to live, but somehow there's this, I think the soul yearns to align in its incarnations with that first original choice, the first original sort of essence or identity that soul has. Again, this is what I'm sensing. Because what we're talking about here has been going on for thousands of years, and it's been moving through, as we said earlier, religions and different ascended masters who have accessed this realm. So that's what makes sense to me. And so the dynamic part is choice. We can, every lifetime. Why do people choose something in a lifetime and maybe they make different choices so they don't quite align with that, and then they come back again. So it may be that the soul is reincarnating continually until that full alignment comes with the original incarnation. And I hope you're not going to ask what happens after that, because that's part of what I'm going to be putting in my book. I'm working on, I'm not finished yet. I'm almost finished with my book, But that's a question I have, is like, what happens when we reach that full alignment with the very first choice we've made? That's a big question that I don't know if we can answer today.
And we'll have you back for that one. I know. Right. I'm going to be waiting. Another question I ask, I know I asked my friend, who's an astrologer, can you read my chart again? He's like, the planets haven't moved, Heather. Now, how often can you access your records? How frequently? What does that look like?
So accessing the records, sometimes people come to me and they'll be like, how often should I do it? It's like, there's absolutely no answer to that. What happens is, it all depends on why we come to the records. People are drawn to the records 100% of the time. That's who comes to me. They're drawn to it. I don't run around saying, hey, you should have a reading. No, it's like, I can't sell the divine anyway. So I think what happens is people come to the records for clarification, for maybe they're stuck, challenged, maybe to clear trauma and wounds. Certainly that happens. And then depending on how they experience their own light, because you're really having a conversation when I open your records, you're having a divine conversation with the divine, or a conversation with the divine aspect of yourself. So you're actually, it's not me, it's this like communication happening between you and you, the bigger, greater, more immense you. And so some people have it and they'll have a reading, and then everything goes click. I like to explain it, and I think I've done this with you, Heather, is that it's like a sprocket. I equate our lives on this earth as we get out of our own groove at various times in our lives. And when we access the records, we're washed over with the divine essence of who we are. And it just automatically, we just click in like a sprocket, and we feel more complete, more of ourselves. And when that happens, is that permanent? I believe it is. Depends on where you're at when you allow that. I mean, if you're really allowing the sprocket to come in and you go, I've had people that go, oh my gosh, that makes perfect sense. Oh my gosh. And so there's no need to come back to the records, right? So it's a tool for us to be reminded why we came here and who we are and what we're here to do. So you can come to the records as often as you like, as if you feel it. There are times people go through things in their lives, and maybe a past wound or a subconscious pattern pops up again and they're not sure, or life happens and then they'll say, I think I want to access the records again. And the other kind of fun thing about this is that because it's quantum energy, when I usually record the readings for people, obviously all on Zoom, because of COVID. What happens is, so the recordings, I send the recordings to the individuals, and the records remind me each and every time in every reading, make sure to listen back to this because it will change. And so the idea of this, and I think you're all going to resonate, I feel like you're going to resonate with this, with the work that you all do, is the divine moves on the spoken word. And so as we're dialoguing back and forth in your records, that is divine having its way, in a sense, if it's your own divine, moving through back and forth, right? So when you listen back, quantum energy doesn't die. It's not fixed. So you're going to hear it. It's not, and you're not going to hear it differently because you're in a different space when you listen. You will literally, it will be different. I've had people write back to me a year later and say, I just listened to my recording from a year ago. Oh my God, there were things there I don't remember hearing. Well, that's because it really does change. And that's equivalent to, or a good maybe analogy is when you sacred tomes, right? No matter, the Bible is one example, but you pick up a sacred tome, whatever that is, how come something happens when you're reading it? When something does happen, I know for me, I'm not fully familiar with the whole Bible, but I know that in my history, when I felt anxious about anything, if I read one of the Psalms, I felt soothed 100% of the time. So, divine, when it is in words, it never dies. It is the same. It activates in the present. It has no beginning, middle, or end. It's the all that isness of everything. And that's what we're accessing when we access the Akashic records. It is the all that isness of everything. And so those recordings never, I mean, they shift and change and evolve. Same thing when you have a written reading. If I read back from 10, 12 years ago, a reading, and I do this quite often, my own, and it's like I just opened my records today. And it's like, well, why is that? It's so amazing. And to me, it's a further affirmation on the presence of this divine essence and what we have access to and who we are.
When we're speaking about who we are, we already talked about, places and spaces, but you did mention, I'm going to hand over to Renee in a minute. You just mentioned, and animals too. And I imagine a lot of our listeners or viewers are going, animals? Like
yeah.
Cat and dog and whatever have records. So just comment on that, and then Renee.
Yeah.
Question.
Well, so if we think about, we'll go back to that, the Akash being the primary substance. What is it? That out of which everything is formed. It's this blankness, right? But all that isness. And then everything that lives and moves and breathes has an effect on that, therefore has an imprint. So pets do. Well, it's interesting because it's important for us to have permission. The way to work with animals is to literally be in the presence of that animal and ask them, can I open your records? I've done this with my dogs and cats. Can I open your records? And they will show you their body language. I had one dog and she would just turn away. I'll be like, oh, I'm not opening your records. Okay. So yeah, we can open the records, and their essence will speak through me. Obviously, they're not sitting there asking questions like a client is, but the way that it works is I will be told about that animal from that animal's Akashic record, basically. And so I might ask questions, if it's a health issue or whatever, or is he happy? And I will hear from the records, not from like a psychic reading, because, we have pet psychics and they do great. And we work with a pet psychic, and she's literally talking for the animal, for the pet. So with this, it's the records of the pet. And then, so that's the answer on pets. And then we also, anything that is public domain is the idea is etched in, has its own record. Then we have sacred spaces, places, and we have addresses. I just started opening the records. It was just another sort of calling here of corporations. Elizabeth Gilbert wrote that book, The Big Magic, and she refers to all creations, whether they're inventions or writing, that they exist as an essence floating in the ethers looking for a match so it can become manifest. And I believe that to be true. So if there is this essence called Harry Potter and it's floating around and it goes, J.K. Rowling, and it comes in, this is what Elizabeth Gilbert writes about in the creative process, then it does make sense that when somebody, a CEO, let's say a person, creates a company and the company always has a goal, product, services, it wants to do something, it itself may have been the idea and it went to that person, they created the company. So therefore the essence of that exists in the Akashic realm. So I've done that a few times, and it's amazing. I can hear it speak from the Akashic realm in the records. And it's helped people who have their companies and they're not sure what to do with them, or they're, they have questions about it. So this is another area that I just opened up into, which is, I have not talked about that until today. And then, of course, we can do spaces, right? As Heather knows.
So Renee.
Yes. So Mary, you've talked a bit about when you're in the records, you're having a conversation with your divine self. Could you speak a little more broadly about what the records actually tell us about God or the divine or source? Like what do we learn about that in the records?
Great question. So what I continually hear from the records is that we are source. That's what I keep hearing. It is source is the all that isness. It is the divine essence, the love, and it's love. What can we really call it that we can all line up with? It is love. That's it. And the records, I've never myself opened my records and asked, what is God? What are you? Explain it more. But what I keep getting is, it is the essence of love itself. And it exists, always did, began everything. And we are it. And that's what I keep getting. We are it. We are love and the essence of love, which is divine. And throughout the ages has been called God and Yahweh and all kinds of other terms. So that's the best that I can answer that question. It is that we are that. And so I don't get anything. I have never received any sense or feeling or have any knowledge from the divine realm that there's something separate. It is literally who we are.
Beautiful. So that leads me to my next question of how, accessing your records, being in the records, what you just spoke of, like, how could that affect one's life? Like why would you encourage someone to go into their records and have these experiences?
Oh, that's such a great question. So, the records don't magically do anything to you. What they do is we're meeting up with the essence of ourselves. And so because of that, it is pure positive alignment while we're in our records. What does that mean? It means that, and we bring our experiences to it. So, people will be asking questions. Why am I always manifesting this? Or I'm sick of this, or I'm stuck. I don't know what to do in my life. Those are common. I mean, those were my questions too, when I began to work in the records. So what happens, it's amazing. Two things happen. First of all, it doesn't matter what we're speaking about in when I'm in someone's records, it doesn't matter. Something happens, transformation happens, transformation, maybe transmutation happens. Whatever the icky part that someone's stuck in, it just gets washed over with the light of the records. So that's one thing that happens. The second thing that happens, which I love this part, is the records encourage, through me as a practitioner, questions to the person who's looking for the clarity or affirmations. So what happens is not that the records ask questions, they encourage that person to think a little bit more about what it is that they're looking for clarity about. So then what happens is that person themselves, they come up with the solutions in the records. It's beautiful. That's where it becomes self-empowering. So they're asking their own questions, and the answers from the records, not the answers, but the thought forms that come through around the questions encourage more questions and more and more. And then all of a sudden, boom, something is different. It just happens. And so what do we get? We get clarity. We understand everything is an opportunity in the records. There's never any mistakes. There are three absolutes in the records that are important, which is fear not, judge not, and resist not. And the records are an all-loving, as we've said, it's divine essence. It's everything is good. There are no bad things. So when we bring our perception, and everything is a perception, and what trips us up and what comes through the records a lot are human perceptions, are what kind of we get stuck in. We have to be aware of them. And so when we're in the records, any perceptions of that individual that might be like, why did I do that? Or this is awful. I had an awful childhood, whatever. The record shot, they like wash light over it. And those same experiences that we perceived as stopping us in our tracks, getting in our way, they all of a sudden become opportunities and assets. And, you know, like, all I can tell you is that happens 100% of the time. You know, I can give an example if you want an example of one. Okay, so there was an individual who was feeling bad about a part of his life where he was, he referred in the now time as he was mad dog. He just had, this guy is a shaman today. And, you know, and he said, I was mad dog. I was yelling at people on the streets. I hated homeless people. It was just this, you know, awful thing. His perception were in his records. As we talk about mad dog, we started to talk about the energy of mad dog, which was very powerful. Mad dog had power. We took that power, and the records just do this. All of a sudden, the power was brought into his life now as a shaman, and it became transmuted. So Mad Dog became an asset, not and an opportunity to be more powerfully doing shamanic light work. It's just what happened. And it's like, that's what happens with all of our experiences. We can look at our experiences, and it's our perception, and the Akashic records show us 100% of the time that how we perceive negative, what we think are negative things are actually the energy of them, we'll say, are actually our soul's choice in experiencing life in a way that will bring us closer to what our journey is at this lifetime. They always feed into it in some way. When we look at it through the light of the Akashic records, all of a sudden it becomes transmuted into opportunities and assets. So somebody who had a really rough childhood and now they're doing healing work, they're going to help more people because of that experience, those experiences that they had. So it's a like, you know, oh wow, it makes sense. It's like we get to go, oh my gosh, oh aha, no wonder. That's another thing that happens. Well, no wonder I chose that family or this or that, because now it's now in my toolkit, in my life that I'm here to live fully in a co-creative way.
So Mary, speak a little bit more to us about how healing works when working with the Akashic records.
It's kind of what I could speak specifically, but it is, you know, just looking at any notes that I wanted to bring to this. So for example, we become empowered. What happens is we become empowered, and the actions. So after we're in our records and we've brought, you know, we come to the records for clarity, affirmation, confirmation on things. It's not always like to fix bad things that we think are bad. What happens is we have inspired action after we're in our records. The inspired actions are happening because we're aligning during that time in our records, during those sessions, we're aligning with exactly who we are as divine essence and our soul's journey. Because the idea behind all of this is that our souls choose the journey. We're not, you know, on the other side before we come in and somebody says, well, here's the plan, take it or leave it. No. I mean, there are some people who believe that. I don't believe that. I think that the soul chooses and says, I will participate at this life. Like we're all here in this pretty crazy time right now on this planet. And what I know to be true is we chose this. We didn't choose specifically to be in New York or me in California, whatever. But every action that we take leads us back to what we've chosen to do. At least in the records, we find that out. We start to discover there are no mistakes. There are no I shoulda, coulda. No, we begin to discover, oh, I did this and that now makes sense because of this and that and that. Everything comes that again, it goes into a groove. And so the healing happens from that. It happens automatically. And maybe we should say healing. I think it's clarity. We remember who we are. And when we remember who we are, we know what to do next. Everything falls into its right place and space in our lives. I've had people come to me with, where they had to shed some things, or people that were around them, but they come to that in the reading and they'll go, wow, that's not really benefiting. And because the records will clarify what they're here to do. And when the records show you what you're here to do, it's through you dialoguing. You go, whoa, as a person in the records, I know, you just go, whoa, I know this. I am here for that. Wow. And then when we close the records, that person will know, I think I need to release this. I think it's important for me to do that. Or that company I was going to form, it's time to do it now. It's affirmation on why we're here. And so if we want to call it healing, that's where it happens. And putting those perceived traumas in the Akashic perspective, then we come to see that we actually have more power in our lives than we realize. We might have chosen those kinds of experiences because it's part of it's why it feeds into why we're here. I'll just say that.
And how does it feed into karma and also shadow work?
Interesting. I think it might be a chapter, it's somewhere in my book that I had asked the records about karma. And what I've heard from the records is that that's a perception that there is no karma. Because karma implies stuff that's attached to you that you have to play it out or get rid of it, or at least that's, in our world, in our third dimensional world, that's kind of how we know it. People throw that term around a lot. Karma implies something that you need to release, or something that's still hanging around with you. The records don't call it karma. What they do refer to, though, quite often, is that our DNA never dies. We know that DNA is energy. And so our DNA from every single lifetime is still with us. So if we find out that we had a lifetime where we were a plant medicine, healer, that's still with us. And so we can actually access, I remember once they were saying I think it was in one of my readings, that if let's say somebody has a diagnosis of cancer and they get it in this time, if they find out that they know they were living in another time period where there was no cancer and maybe no disease, which quite often that was the case, that person can access that part of their DNA and ask for, by intention only, just ask for that part of their DNA to come forward and invoke that essence from that lifetime into your body. And it will not recognize the cancer, so the cancer goes away, becomes non-existent. So karma, I think the records really, they talk more about past lives and DNA energy, and that we can have energies from lifetimes that we can access, we can harness, and they will make sense when we are going down roads that are not benefiting us as well. So if somebody was a major warrior in some time period and they were just really killing a lot of people, and maybe it was for the good of humanity at that time, it could also be not for the good of humanity. That person, that energy, we can access that energy, and some people would call it karma, but the records will call it, DNA energy, and we can access it and then utilize it and turn it into an opportunity and an asset, so to speak. So it's not, so they don't really, and shadow work, shadow. So the records speak of shadow as, they don't speak of shadow, but in terms of like our perceptions of evil or darkness or shadow, and they just say it's simply lack of light. It's simply when you don't know you're divine. That's it. So if you don't know you're divine, then the actions you take will not be of that. And we can look around, see that all over the place. And so that's why the records are so important today. If we can just remind people, you're more powerful divinely than you realize. And when we feel our divinity, when we feel our divine connection to source, our actions will come from that. And that's where the shadow then has no place. Eckhart Tolle delves into this with the ego conscious, the collective ego conscious. And so those who feed into the collective ego conscious don't know they're divine. And the records basically say that's kind of what's going on.
That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. Thank you. And Renee?
So, Mary, you mentioned that you were guided to the records, and then there was this awareness that, they were always there, but you didn't know you knew they were there. Could you tell us a little bit more about your story of how you came to be working in the records and how you were attracted to that?
Sure. I was working in the, I call it the trenches in New York at the network, CBS, ABC, NBC. I was working in news, and then I was working in soap operas and drama, and moved through the ranks that way, like 30 years of that. And then came out to California to work on General Hospital, the soap, as a contract director. So it's interesting. I have to say that all those years, I remembered it was very exciting. I loved it. Who wouldn't be excited having that kind of a career? And that's where the Emmys behind me came from. I always felt it wasn't a fit, and I didn't know how to release it. I didn't know what to do. And it wasn't very conscious. I'll just say that. It was just, I remember coming home after 14-hour days in studios and just feeling depleted, exhausted, and not knowing what it was. Like, what was it? I felt something. It was my soul. Now I know. And so it was interesting that I wound up coming out, contracts changed, things shifted and changed. And I wound up not working at General Hospital. I'll just say that. And it was different people coming in that now, in retrospect, they were very dark people. And I used to feel going in the building darkness, and I didn't know what it was. And I just stuck with it because I had a contract. So during that, sort of the end of that, when I backed out of it, I was I was back in New York, and I was not sure where my life was going to go. And I remembered before I moved back to New York, I'd had a psychic reading with this fantastic woman, and one of many readings I had. And she said, there's a dude over your shoulder. He's really good looking, and he's over your right shoulder. And I said, who is he? That's so interesting. And she said, well, he says he's been with you lifetimes, and he's overseeing your Akashic records. And I asked her, what are those? And she said, I don't know, but that's what he says he does. And then she also said that he was translating sacred geometry ideas, I'll say, into what I would recognize. And that would happen in my work, because when I was working with actors, I would come up with things, and the actors would say, where did you come up with that? And it would be really an exciting new way to do something. And I used to say, I don't know, it just came in. And I didn't realize what I was saying. I would go, I don't know, it came in. And we would move on. So that was the first thing, was that reading. I went home, I looked up the Akashic records, and it wasn't like it hit me over the head, but I was like, I feel like I know this, but I didn't move with it. The second sign that I had was I was at a metaphysical bookstore that I frequented here in Venice, near Venice Beach, California, the Bodhi Tree. And I was in a back room by myself, and it was, I don't know, there was a book teetering off the shelf above me, and like really sticking out, to the point where I looked up and I pulled it down, and it was How to Read Your Akashic Records by Linda Howe. It was that book. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take this home. And I went through it so fast. And I started in that book opening my records, and that's where I started to hear things. And I was like, whoa, still said to myself, who, me? I can access this? I was doubtful. And so I went back into, creating projects. And this might have been around the time when I did the shoot at the United Palace, Heather. I think it might have been the same time period. So then the third one was on one of my birthdays. My very dearest friend put in a card enough, the right amount of cash to begin studying with Linda Howe and the Akashic Studies, the Center for Akashic Studies. And that was the third one. And, you have a friend that sees that in you. She had read some of the readings that I was doing because I was just doing it myself and then sharing it. And she saw something and she said, I just really feel you need to be doing this. And it was the third sign. So I did. And it's like, what am I going to do? Give her cash back? I was like, no, I'm going to do this. But as soon as I began to open the records and study more and heal my own wounds, work on that, begin healing, I should say, everything fell into place, everything. Plus, I learned by opening my own records, more of what I'm here to do. My records told me that I'm a writer, and I was telling my own records, I would be typing, no, I'm not, I'm a director. Like I'm arguing with my own records. And the records were like, Mary, your records show you writing. And so I struggled with that for a couple of years. And then finally, I released my attachment to know, I'll say it that way. And then boom, I was called to write a screenplay, and it was the Mary Magdalene screenplay. And there you go. So that's what the records do. They remind us why we're here. We can bucket all we want, but we're always going to, somehow the universe will bring us back around to it. So I think that when I was guided to the records, I think what happened was all of those years when I felt not quite right, I'll just say that on some very deep level. And that's not to say I'm working in the industry still, but it's different. It was that I hadn't found, I wasn't doing the part of my life that I'm here to do, which is this. And so when we're not, we could be having fun working here and there, but we will know there'll be something that we just like, it's hard to explain. It's not that we hate what we're doing, because I love what I'm doing. I love working with actors, but my soul was calling me for something else that my soul has chosen to do here. And here it is. And then it just sort of, everything became more complete for me. So that's how I came to the records. And so my own experience is wonderful. It's what helps me when I work with people, because I'm not somebody who sat at the top of the Himalayas meditating for 40 years, and now I'm in the records. I lived life, made choices, had those weird feelings. I don't know what I'm here to do. All the things that now I help people with through their own records, I am an example of that to this day. And I think that's what is, I want to say, nurturing. I feel nurtured by my work in a way that I never did. I'll just say that in the records.
Mary, this has been such a rich conversation, and I know that we have a lot of listeners and viewers who are going to really want to explore the Akashic records much more intimately. So can you tell us how some of our viewers and our listeners can get a little more information on the Akashic records?
So you mean like in general? I mean, I love Linda Howe's work, and she has 3 books through Hay House. I think it's Hay House. So Linda Howe, you just Google search Linda, and there's another Linda Howe of ufology, Linda Moulton Howe. This one, that's not her. This is just Linda Howe, Howe, and she has 3 books: How to Healing Your Wounds in the Akashic Records, or what is it? Healing Through the Akashic Records, Discover Your Soul's Path Through the Akashic Records, and then How to Read the Akashic Records. That was a book that was going to hit me on the head off the shelf. There's that. And then, I don't know. I mean, then there's my website. You want me to share that? I mean, I don't know. Okay. So my website is spirittherapybymary.com. And it's interesting. The records gave me that name. I wanted just Spirit Therapy, but they were like, no, you got to do by Mary. So whatever, that's what it is. So it's Spirit, SPIRITTHERAPY by BY Mary, MARY.com. So that's my Akashic Records website. And you can contact me and read things there. I have to say, you just have to Google search it. There's no one source. I am going to begin to dig into Madame Blavatsky. What's interesting is I live in Ojai, California. I did not know, this is another thing that's kind of trippy fun. I did not know where I was really in Ojai and what's going on here, but the Theosophical Society, one of their bases is here in Ojai, and Madame Blavatsky was the founder of that. And there's also a high school that's based on one of her colleagues at that time that also believed in this idea of an esoteric, a divine realm where things are recorded and that we can access. I had no idea that I was here in this portal of this belief system that I actually work in until recently. So, because I just met theosophical people and I went to the Kratona, it's called, and Krishnamurti centers here, the foundation. These were folks that were all delving into this world and bringing it to us in their way, right? As theologians, I guess, or philosophers, certainly authors. And so I would encourage, like, I know, I think that Edgar Casey talks about the Akashic Records. You can look that up. Madame Blavatsky, definitely, that's heavier reading, I believe, but I would delve into that, right? But just, I guess just Google search or go to my website. And you know, I encourage anyone who's going to look into this to make sure that follow your intuition. So when you're reading about we should do this with anything, but when you're reading about this or looking things up, if you get a hit, yes, keep reading. If you just get like, not sure, then don't. We have to rely more on our intuition these days, especially. And yeah, right.
Very, very, very good advice, Mary.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Mary, thank you so very, very, very much. This has been such a rich and beautiful, wonderful and deep conversation. We're so extremely grateful to you. Thank you.
This was an honor, and I love the work that you guys are all doing. Seriously, guys and gals, I should say.
Absolutely, it's a whole group of us. And Reverend Renee, thank you once again for joining us.
Yes, thank you. It was such a beautiful conversation. Thank you, Mary.
You're welcome.
And Bishop Heather Shea, we wouldn't be here without you. We wouldn't be you're the one person that makes all this possible. Thank you, as I've said many times, for this privilege. Thank you.
Yeah. This was fun. I enjoyed it and I learned a lot. So thank you all. I feel very honored and blessed and excited to learn more.
Me too.
And to all our listeners and all our viewers, thank you for joining us once again at Open Heart Conversation.